Donald Fixico is an American writer and intellectual. He is a distinguished foundation professor of history at Arizona State University. He was the Thomas Bowlus Distinguished Professor of American Indian History, CLAS scholar, and the founding director of the Center for Indigenous Nations Studies at the University of Kansas. He is a policy historian and ethno-historian. Fixico is of the Shawnee, Sac, and Fox, Muskogee Creek, and Seminole tribes. Fixico received his postdoctoral fellowships at UCLA and the Newberry Library, Chicago. In 2000, President Bill Clinton appointed him to the Advisory Council of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and in 2002 he was the John Rhodes Visiting Professor of Public Policy in the Barrett, the Honors College at Arizona State University. In 2006, the Organization of American Historians awarded a short-term residency award to Fixico to give lectures for 2 weeks in Japan. Fixico has given lectures nationally and internationally and works with tribes and indigenous organizations. In 2012, he lectured at Sichuan University in China and University of Auckland in New Zealand in 2013. Fixico has been a visiting lecturer and visiting professor at University of California, Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego State University, and University of Michigan. He was an exchange professor at University of Nottingham, England, and visiting professor in the F. Kennedy Institute at the Free University of Berlin. Fixico writes most on the Native American experience in history, especially in oral history and the U.S. West. He writes in depth and often about urbanization, particularly in conjunction with termination narratives in the American Indian diaspora. In his book Urban Indian Experience in America, Fixico discusses prior negative stereotypes about adjustment. This downtrodden image does not accurately portray urban Indians, particularly in the 1990s when at least 3 generations have survived the relocation years of the 1950s and 1960s. The early image misrepresents the urban Indian population to an unfortunate degree, since many Indian citizens in cities hold professional positions and are members of the middle class in America. p. 27. Said of Fixico, Donald Fixico challenges scholars of American and Indian history to revise their thinking, enlarge their seeing, and engage in an effort to understand Native people and their communities. He constructs a convincing argument about the uniqueness of Indian history, and his explanation for seeing the world through Indian lenses leads Fixico to craft a terminology that makes a great deal of sense. Margaret Connells as Regents Professor of Native American and Celtic History at the University of New Mexico and author of Scottish Highlanders and Native Americans, Indigenous Education in the 18th Century Atlantic World. He has published a dozen books: American Indians in a Modern World, 2008, Treaties with American Indians, an Encyclopedia of Rights, Conflicts, and Sovereignty, 3 volumes, ed. 2007, Daily Life of Native Americans in the 20th Century, 2006, The American Indian Mind in a Linear World, American Indian Studies and Traditional Knowledge, 2003, The Urban Indian Experience in America, 2000, The Invasion of Indian Country in the 20th Century, Tribal Natural Resources in American Capitalism, 1998, 2nd ed., 2011, Rethinking American Indian History, ed. 1997, Urban Indians, 1991, An Anthology of Western Great Lakes Indian History, ed. 1988, Intermination and Relocation, Federal Indian Policy, 1945 to 1960, 1986. Call for Change, The Medicine Way of American Indian History, Ethos, and Reality, June 2013, and Indian Resilience and Rebuilding, Indigenous Nations in the Modern American West, October 2013. He also has contributed to a number of publications, including Removal of the Western Southeast Indians, Handbook of North American Indians, Southeast, Volume 14. U.S. Government Printing, 2004, Witness of Change Over 50 Years of Indian Activism in Tribal Politics. Beyond Red Power, Tribal Politics in the 1960s. School for Advanced Research Press, 2007, The Federal Indian Relocation Program of the 1950s and the Urbanization of Indian Identity. Removing Peoples, Forced Removal in the Modern World. Oxford University Press, 2009, The Literature of American Indian History. A Century of American Historiography. Bedford St. Martin's Press, 2009, From Tribal to Indian, American Indian Identity in the 20th Century. Native Diasporas, Indigenous Identities and Settler Colonialism in the Americas. University of Nebraska Press, 2014. Professor Fixico has worked on nearly 20 historical documentaries, including Texas Ranch House, 2006, Freedom Riders, 2009, and American Experience, 1988. Donald Fixico at the Internet Speculative Fiction Database interview www.pbs.org/wgbh/American Experience/features/interviews/TCRR interviews/flavor equals mobile